we're looking at the Thor programmer now. The programmer is kind of a construction kit for our synthesizers. Right now we're looking at the init pass, the initialized patch. And you'll see that there's an oscillator here, an analog oscillator, and this is a very similar oscillator to the oscillator that you find in the subtractor. But down below now you see that there are two other plates, kind of look like metal plates there, that say oscillator 2 and 3, but there's no actual oscillator in there. We can add those oscillators as we choose, and what's really interesting though is that they're not all analog oscillators. We have the option of wavetable, phase modulation, FM pair, multi-oscillator, and noise. We'll take a look at the oscillators a little bit more in depth later. To add an oscillator, so simply select one, and then you have to go up over here to the routing section and turn it on and set it so that number 2 is in fact routed to the mixer. And so now we hear our sound. And if we, here, let's detune that. Okay. Okay, so now we have oscillators in octaves. And then, of course, we have a third oscillator here. We could do the same thing and pick one of the others, maybe. Here we have a wavetable oscillator, which is essentially what the Maelstrom uses, though with not as many complex waves. And doesn't have the option of dealing with motion quite the same way. It does have position, but it doesn't move as easily. Okay, so those are the 3 oscillators. Over here on the next, we have a filter. And of course, that's what we need in a synthesizer is a filter. And once again, though, we can change the type of filter. Right now it's set to low pass ladder, which is just your basic low pass filter, very modeled after the filters found in the Moog synthesizers of the 60s and 70s. There's the state variable filter, which is very similar to what we found on the subtractor. It can choose between low pass and band pass and high pass and so on and so forth. And then we have a comb filter, which we've ran into with the Maelstrom, which is, again, just kind of a delay. It creates some kind of interesting things, best used when sweeping. And then the formant filter. The formant filter is really quite unique, and you'll have fun with that. Formants are modeled after the shape that your mouth makes to produce vowels. So if you say A, you'll see that your mouth kind of moves into a smile, and if you say oh, it's a very round sound. And so that's what formants do. And you can hear it sounds a little like talking. It has a gender control. Right now this sounds kind of male. I don't think it really ever sounds very female. Okay. Now we have a second filter as well, and this, again, we can do the same thing. With this filter, we can set it to any one of the 4 filters. Also, I should mention that we can bypass both filters. And so when we bypass the filter, a filter, even if it's not doing anything, even if you set the cutoff frequency to maximum, it will still do a little bit of comb filtering. By bypassing it, it won't do anything at all. So we can choose to not have the filters at all. But if we do have a filter, we can set these filters up to work in 2 different ways. They can either, now, also to send things now to the second filter, you would have to turn on the controls. And if you do that, these will work separately. This one will filter, it'll go into the mixer, and then it comes in and it filters there. When you were set up like this, then you have to set this control right here going to this direction, or this control going in that direction, or both. See, now we have no signal at all. Okay. We can also run them in parallel. in series, I should say. And that's where this filter does its filtering, and then it runs into here, similar to the way that the filters work in the subtractor. And so, more obviously. Okay, so that's one way, and if we do it the other way, now the oscillators are going into this separately. Okay, we have our standard LFOs, but you'll notice that it has one thing that's missing. The LFO doesn't have a destination, and we'll see why in just a little bit. But and the same is true with our mod envelope. So neither of these have any controls to set it, at least not right here, to tell you where it's actually going to modulate, what it's going to modulate. The filter envelope, on the other hand, directly modulates the filters. And so if you want that to happen, you use set this control. If you don't want it to happen at all, you can turn it off. Okay. So you can see that the modulation is now on the filter as opposed to on the envelope itself. And then the amp envelope is, of course, modulating the amplitude from the amplifier. Now over here on the right, we have another section called the global section. And it's a little different. We do have two effects. We have delay and chorus built into this, and so if we want to turn those on, so there's a delay, and then a chorus. Okay. And then we also have another filter slot. Now, the one difference between this filter and the other filter is that this filter will filter everything, whereas this one, these can choose to filter one or the other. See, we don't have to filter all of them. So you get to pick which of these are going to actually be filtered over here. Over on this one, it's always going to be filtering. So here, let's pick a bandpass. Okay. Now our envelope down here, the global envelope, only affects this filter by default. But again, you'll see that we can change that. And then we have another LFO, which is again a standard LFO that will again have to be assigned somewhere. So those are the devices that we have there. We also have a shaper. Again, we've first encountered that on the Maelstrom as well. So those are the devices in the programmer. You can basically pick them and pick and choose which ones you want. What I'd like you to do is consider taking a look at the Propellerheads website. That's propellerheads.se, not .com, and there are some great tutorials on using the Thor, on programming the Thor, starting simply with just a couple of oscillators and no filters at all, and you'll be really quite surprised at what you can do with that.